with our topic today. So welcome to those of you who are continuing to join us. So feel free to open your microphones and share with us what's a fun fact about your community. Mary, I think you have a Baumgars. You want to tell us about that?
Oh, we do. We have a new Baumgars. It's nice. It's very busy, and it's been very successful so far. It's been open for about 4 months.
Cool.
And we are also known for our sauerkraut pizza.
Yes.
And gravel top donuts.
Yes.
And we have a solar farm. So
okay. I have personally enjoyed both the sauerkraut pizza, which sounded odd when I was first told about it, and the gravel top rolls donuts are amazing as well. So thanks for sharing. So who else has something to share about their community as we're onboarding people today? And if you've just joined us, welcome. We'd love to hear what's a fun fact about your community. You can use your chat box if you would like. Or just something fun about your community. I didn't realize this would be a tough question, but Josh, you have anything you want to share today?
Oh, I was trying to think. Kearney does have one of the largest car collections currently, anyway, for the foreseeable future, called the Classic Car Collection, with roughly 200 classic cars ranging from the late 1800s all the way up to early 2000s.
Perfect.
Classic sports there.
So we'll want to check that out. That's out on the east side of town. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, it makes a great day trip because it's connected to the Cabela's building. It's on the northeast corner. So if you're coming out to see the cranes here in about a month and looking for some other stuff to fill your day, it's a couple of good options, as most people want to make a stop to Cabela's.
Cool. Paula says she's bringing her husband there soon. So that's good. Welcome, Marty, and the rest of you who've just joined us. We're just onboarding people, and I'm encouraging you to tell us what is a fun fact about the community where you live, since we're talking about community doing today. We'd love to know a little bit more about what's available and what's going on in your community. We've also done a test of the temperatures. It's currently 23 here in Holdridge, enough that I don't have to zip up my winter coat as I walk to my car at lunchtime. So that's good news indeed. So what else is going on in your lives as we continue to onboard our individuals and participants for today? It maybe isn't a fact, but it's something. Sharon has a birthday in her family, I believe, today. So, Amy is saying that Lake McConaughey, Lake Mac, as it's known to Nebraskans, is a huge go-to for their community. And in the winter, there's an eagle viewing at the lake as well. So would love to see those. So hopefully you're getting a good representation of our bald eagles there in the Ogallala area. So thanks, Amy, for sharing that. So for those of you who are just joining us, welcome. We try to acknowledge you as much as we can, but as we get closer to our start time, which will be in just a moment or two, we're not always able to personally acknowledge you, but continue to add things to the chat box about a fun fact about your community or where you live. So we'd love to hear what's out there in your communities. So.
Well, it's not about Holdridge where I live now, but I'm from Eustis, and Eustis is the sausage capital of Nebraska.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
and we used to have a pizza place that had sauerkraut on the pizzas. It was a good deal. It's been a lot of years ago.
And Eustis is the original home of the Village Pie Maker. So if any of you have ever bought one of those, that started in Eustis, correct?
That is right.
Yeah. Nicole says they have the world's largest shamrock at the intersection of Highway 20 and 281 in O'Neill. And O'Neill was also the first parish for Father Flanagan, who founded Boys Town. So, yay. And then Miranda is sharing that her local veterinarians in Hardington, I believe, are featured on a reality show on the National Geographic Channel. And it's currently in its 3rd season. I have watched a little bit of that, and it's fun to see that Nebraska is being represented on a national TV show. So Lauren says that Neely is the only one in the world. That's interesting. Marty says he met his wife in Omaha when they were in high school, and little did he know that they were 10 minutes from each other as they were growing up. And so his wife is very important to him. So, hey, so I will continue to monitor those, and we do have a lot of people joining us, but I do want to just honor all of your time and our presenter's time. She's got a lot of great information for us today, so I do want to go ahead and get started. So before we get going, though, I do want to just take a quick moment and acknowledge and recognize our partners at the Nebraska Department of Economic Development for their financial investment and support of the HomeNE Learning Network. I speak for everybody here in the Office of South Central Economic Development District in saying that we do appreciate the department and their staff for their ongoing support of this learning network that we have initiated. So, and I also want to mention to you today that chances are you are seeing a new name and face. Serving as your technical host today, Sherry Alber, who normally mans that station for me, is away on medical leave. And so Josh Young, one of our business and community consultants here at SCED, is stepping up to the plate and filling Sherry's role for us today. So Sherry, if you have logged in, get well soon, and welcome to Josh. And in our Zoom world, I'm just going to give him a virtual high five for doing that for us today. So if you'd like to do that, feel free to give him a high five as well. So at this point, I do want to honor everybody's time and get started. If you are attending and you have issues, feel free to log on to our YouTube channel as well. We are streaming today's presentation to that for your viewing options. So feel free to check us out on YouTube as well. So welcome and good afternoon. I'm Lori, and I'm with South Central Economic Development District, and I am going to be your host once again today. Thanks for joining us on this hopefully a little bit warmer February day, but our HomeNE webinar series does continue to grow and expand across the state of Nebraska, and many of you have been very faithful in making that happen for us. This network has become a meaningful and growth-oriented opportunity for all of you. So it's our goal that your organization or community has reaped dividends as a result of your participation in the HomeNE Learning Network. So just want to say thank you to all of you who are maybe joining us for the first time today. And as well, a big thank you to those of you who continually support the HomeNE Learning Network. You make this just doable for us and give us great joy in bringing these presentations and gatherings to you on a monthly and semi-annual basis. So today we have the pleasure of hearing from Paula Jensen. She is with Dakota Resources, and she is going to be talking to us today about the community strategic doing process. And I'm really looking forward to this. I bubbled with excitement during our practice session. I'm just really looking forward to what she has to share with us. And at the conclusion of Paula's presentation, Sharon will be shining this month's spotlight on the Nebraska Regional Officials Council Broadband Initiative that was launched earlier this month. So before we introduce Paula to you today, I just want to take a moment and encourage you to participate in today's webinar. Jot down your questions. There will be a Q&A later on, and jot down your questions and have those ready to ask of Paula. Also, feel free to use the chat box to enter your questions as we go along, and also to post your thoughts. We'll be monitoring the chat box and presenting those questions and comments to Paula later in the presentation. So as you can see on your screen, we encourage you to open up your chat box and just tell us what interests you about today's topic and what do you want to know more about at the end of today's webinar. So enter those and we'll be checking those as well and passing those on to Paula as we can. So HomeNE is a learning network, and we do learn best when we interact and engage with each other. So please share your thoughts with us on those items. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon Heffley, the Executive Director here at South Central Economic Development District. Sharon?
Hey, good afternoon. It's good to see all of your faces and hear all those dings as you're chiming in today. Welcome to the February edition of HomeNE 2021 webinar series. As most of you know, the South Central Economic Development District serves as the lead agent for this learning network, and we're glad you're here. HomeNE is designed for people all across Nebraska seeking to successfully address our local housing challenges. The HomeNE purpose is to build a network of individuals and communities with a shared interest in assessing and addressing housing issues in rural communities, to provide a safe space to discuss what's been tried and to find motivation to take another step in the right direction, to learn from the successes and struggles of others, to take away new ideas or see things through a new lens, and to inspire you, and in turn help you inspire those around you, your tribe, because what you do in your community is valuable. Nobody's going to do it quite like you, and now is the time to leave your mark. Today, we're joined by Paula Jensen of Dakota Resources. We are really excited to have you here, Paula. Let me tell you a little bit about Paula before she takes over control here. Paula has a passion for community leadership and development that drives her personal and professional life. She serves as the Vice President of Program Development with Dakota Resources based in Renner, South Dakota, which is right outside of Sioux Falls. Dakota Resources is a 501c3 nonprofit, 501c3 is nonprofit, a community development financial institution, or CDFI, might sound more familiar. And their mission is connecting capacity and capital to empower rural communities. Paula's roles with Dakota Resources include resource development, program management, and community coaching. Paula earned a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting from Northern State University and is also a proud graduate of the Leadership South Dakota class of 2016. Her current volunteer leadership roles include South Dakota Day of Giving Advisory Board, Board of Directors Vice President for Leadership South Dakota, Vice President for Langford Main Street Center, Inc., a community-owned bar and restaurant, and South Dakota Youth Foundation Community Coach. Paula lives in her hometown of Langford, South Dakota, population 318, where she and her husband have owned and operated an auto repair business for 3 decades. Together, they have raised 3 young men who love living rural. Paula, I'm handing it over to you.
Hey, thanks. Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here today, and I'm excited to share with you a bit about strategic doing. So hang on for the ride. We're going to go through a lot of information, jot down your questions, and let's learn a little bit about strategic doing and what it can mean for your community. The book Strategic Doing, 10 Skills for Agile Leadership, was written by Ed Morrison and a team of professors from Purdue University and University of North Carolina. This book helped design a process to help individuals develop leadership skills. The strategic doing process helps people put these skills together in a disciplined fashion and to manage a collaborative group to solve complex problems. Now remember that word complex, because we're going to talk about it a few times today. But systematic change is certainly possible with strategic doing. This sort of transformation is not easy, even for experienced leaders like some of you may be. However, when we start with a small group of really passionate people in our communities who are willing to tackle a complex challenge, we can make a lot of strategic doers and create a lot of strategic doers in our community. And the fun part about this is that we get to experience things together. We get to make some little bets, and we also get to celebrate some small wins along the way. I'm going to share in the chat too where you can find that book, Strategic Doing, just on Amazon. And so you can go check that out there as well. But that's what this is based on. And I have received practitioner training in strategic doing, and we utilize this process in our community coaching. So by the end of today's workshop, I hope that you will better understand the nature of the transformation from hierarchy to networks. I hope that you will understand the need to think, behave, and do things differently in your communities. And I hope that you'll understand and learn the 4 questions and the 10 rules of strategic doing. As I move forward, I want you to participate in the chat box. I want you to type in a challenge that you're facing right now in your community, okay? So I'm going to go to the next slide and continue to talk about strategic doing, but you think about that. What's a challenge you're facing in your community right now? Let me know what that is. So strategic doing was really born in 2011 by this group that I mentioned. And they came up with a system, a belief system, a set of beliefs that we as practitioners explore. So we believe that we have a responsibility to build a prosperous future for ourselves, right? Oftentimes I'll say, create the community you want to live in. That none of us can do this work by ourselves. We need to be open, honest, and focused, and have really great collaboration. And lastly, we believe in doing, not just talking. So that's kind of an overview of what strategic doing believes. Next, we are facing really complex, tangled, wicked challenges in our community. And I see in your chat that some of the challenges that are coming up, marketing and communicating resources, all things workforce, going to be helping a community set up a local community development organization, housing for employees, right? Expanding programs. Those are a lot of really wicked, complex challenges. But here's some good news. Complex challenges can be solved. If a problem is complex, it means that it has many unpredictable components. Complexity does not mean difficulty. On the other hand, a complicated challenge refers to a high level of difficulty. If a problem is complicated, there may be many parts, and it will certainly take a lot of skill and hard work to solve it. I'll give you an example. A car, because I live with cars at my house. We have lots of cars everywhere. A car is complicated, okay? The components can be separate and dealt with in a systematic and logical way. It may be hard to see for the untrained eye like me, but for my husband, who's the fixer and the skilled mechanic, for him creating the solution is easy. You take the parts apart, you can do it in a repeatable manner, right? It's the same on every vehicle. But here's an example of a complex challenge. A car in a traffic jam is complex. There's no degree of order, there's no control, there's no predictability. A complex problem like a traffic jam is more challenging than the sum of its parts because it interacts in unpredictable ways. So as we talk about strategic doing going forward, we're going to talk about those complex problems, those things that are more challenging because they're unpredictable. Increasingly, we face complex challenges in our communities that are embedded in complex adaptive systems, right? Solving complex challenges, however, is intuitive. It is simple, and only requires an open mind, flexibility, and basic common sense. When you are confronted with a complex issue, think manage, not solve. Using a try, learn, adapt process like strategic doing will transform the way things get done in your community. We're not going to answer it now, but the challenge that you've shared in the chat, I want you to think about, is it complex, unpredictable, or is it complicated? Is it something that can be broke down into parts and the process can be repeated to fix it? I want you to think about that, okay? So a lot of us have experienced strategic planning. And that process where we create a plan in our organization and then that plan sometimes sits on a shelf. Strategic planning honestly has gotten a bit of a bad rap over the years. And that may be because our systems are changing. Strategic planning as a management discipline emerged from operations planning during World War II. I didn't know that until I learned strategic doing. The process is a top-down, linear, logical, and heavily analytic design to guide hierarchical organizations, okay? So organizations that have a president, a vice president, very corporate structured. The problem, of course, is that our current organizations in our communities and our economies don't function in that way. They're complex. They have little degree of order. There's sometimes not very much control or predictability. So while conventional strategic planning can produce a plan, the process becomes less and less successful in generating results. Strategic doing in open, loosely connected networks is a different discipline from strategic planning. So if you look at the picture on the right of your screen, strategic doing, it's a think and do process, right? You're thinking for a little bit and then you're trying something and doing it. And then you're thinking it through again and maybe resetting your course. And then you're going to try again. It's really more about experimenting and moving things forward as you're doing that. So in those loosely connected networks, there's no command and control structure in place. Participants, like volunteers in your community or just residents, right? They don't have to be an elected official, can collaborate and get things done. They share roles while working on that complex challenge, okay? The next slide shows you about hierarchy and a network. Complex challenges do not respond well to leadership tools that many of us learned in our careers. In the past 50 years or so, we have undergone so many transitions in the way that we work as organizations and as individuals. Until fairly recently, most work has been done in the context of a hierarchy. A lot of our organizations may still be structured as a hierarchy, okay? So on the left side of the screen, that's kind of what a hierarchy looks like. It might be what your organizational structure looks like. But in a hierarchy, one or a few people at the top transmit the instructions to those below. That model has shifted to a network in a lot of our organizations in which individuals and organizations come together to address particular challenges. Their joint efforts in a network may be temporary. So you come together to work on an issue, create a program, solve a problem. And once that challenge is accomplished, you can step back out and come together with a different group, which creates a new network of people, right? So as you're thinking about network versus hierarchy, it's not really a versus, a one or the other. We need both in our world today, and we're going to talk about that. But I want you to share in the chat right now, is your organization or your community working in a hierarchy or in a networked system? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Are you working as a hierarchy or as a networked system? There's no right answer. We need both systems. However, in order to successfully navigate today's complex challenges, we need to think differently. We need to behave differently, and we need to do differently. Networks experiencing good collaborations have several distinguishing features. They don't have a top or a bottom. A network doesn't gather, they do gather around a hub of resources, like SCED is a hub for all of you. They have small groups of maybe 5 to 8 people or teams that are central to that work, and others that are more distant from the work, but supporting it. They have defined roles that shift. Think about in your organizations or in your communities, you often wear a lot of different hats. So your roles are shifting sometimes. Today, Josh is stepping in a role that has shifted for him today, right? And hierarchies are connected to other networks. These are called boundary spanners, right? And what we're going to also learn about is that networks develop a high level of trust. So some are doing, I'm seeing in your chat, some are both hierarchy and network. Some are just a network. That's often awesome. Moving forward versus this is the best that we have done it. Great. We have a couple more slides talking about networks and systems. Take a look at the green, the blue, and the red lines on this page. Each of those lines represents a system or an organization or a project in your community. So what that line shows is that every system has a life cycle. The S curve shows us how systems kind of rise up, they grow, they mature towards the top, and then eventually decline, okay? And then a new system will start, right? And it starts and it grows and it gets to the top again where it's maturing and it declines. In the early stages of any of those systems, a hierarchy is necessary to create a structure and to support a functioning network by focusing on those routine tasks, right? The accounting, the systems. As the system grows and matures, networks become necessary for innovation to happen. So as we think about the challenges in our communities, we often find ourselves nearing the tipping point or the decline phase and needing to jump from that decline phase to a new system or a new S curve. The network effect begins to happen as we reach that tipping point. So you see all those little dots as that first green system is growing. The network's assets are aligning, right, with some other pieces of that network that are also maybe working on the blue line to start something new. So as one group is hospicing an old system into decline, another network of people or resources is coming together to grassroots a new system in our community. Can you think of a system in your community that is at its tipping point or in decline right now? Are you on a board of directors for an organization that's kind of at that tipping point? If so, go ahead and put that in the chat. If you can think of an organization that's at that tipping point. The next slide shows us how we move from that tipping point into new directions. We've learned that managing complex challenges requires new strategies, support systems, and movement towards innovative opportunities. These opportunities are created by asking the right kind of questions along the way. The right question frames a strategic conversation, and it also generates new ideas that point us to what's next in our timeline, right? For instance, in a community that maybe just lost a major employer, leaders could spend a lot of time talking about the things that could go wrong in the current circumstances. This is the problem. See the problem on the screen there? So the problem is it shows that if we just talk about the problem, it doesn't lead us in a good direction, right? Oftentimes it just creates more problems if that's where we focus. But the alternative approach would be to have a conversation around some really good questions about creating opportunities. And the opportunities could be things like reskilling employees or creating opportunities for entrepreneurship, and then moving toward action on those opportunities. The right strategic conversation for a complex challenge is not usually about fixing something that already exists. It's about designing what's next on that timeline. The right strategic conversation also serves as an attractor for others who want to engage in designing and guiding what the new future looks like. So did anybody come up with any organizations in your chat here that are on the tipping point? Yeah. Julia says, I think our downtown businesses are at a tipping point for the fact that they were originally meant to bring people to the downtown and gather, but with COVID and busy schedules, they've had to adapt and innovate by doing things such as curbside pickup, e-commerce, right? So what you're seeing there is a new system emerge, right? Every system has a life cycle, and we have to really remember that in our communities because we sometimes get hung up in tradition. But what the truth is that every system has to change a little bit, okay? So now I would like to walk you through the strategic doing 4 questions and 10 rules. Now that you understand a little bit about systems and how complex problems or complex challenges are easy to solve only with a little flexibility, right, and innovation, the actual strategic doing process is pretty easy to follow. And when they send out the webinar recording, you're going to get some tools and tips that can maybe help you even put some of this into action in your community with a small group and see how it works. Do some experimenting yourself. So strategic doing is really broke down into these 4 questions. What could we do? What should we do? What will we do? And what's our 30-30? And that last one, I like to call it, let's do it. This cycle can really transform leadership, and it can really inspire doers in your community to get involved. We've seen it happen in the short 1.5 years that we've been using strategic doing with some of our communities. It's exciting to see how this process works. And it's a process that you can do over and over and over again. It's simple, but it's not easy, okay? Before you start the next part, rule 1. So rule 1 of the 10 is the rule of civility. So when you gather a group of people together, you gather under the agreement that we all will behave in ways that build trust and mutual respect. If someone, that's the guidelines that are going to kind of keep you moving. We've all been in that group where maybe one person just isn't very respectful to the rest of the group, and it kind of causes the group to dissolve or to not be able to move forward. Just making this agreement before you start, the 1 rule of civility, helps build trust within the group. And trust is the key ingredient here. As we talk about strategic doing, you're gonna hear a lot about building trust. We build trust by behaving in ways that show respect, building relationships, and by doing projects together and sharing roles. There's a lot of opportunity to build trust along this line. So rule two is built around appreciative inquiry. You may have heard of appreciative inquiry or appreciative questions. So this is about starting from a collective purpose and creating that appreciative question. And sometimes we give the community two templates. One template might look like, imagine if, and you allow them to imagine what they would like to see as this group is successful. And then you end it with, what would that look like? Or another template for an appreciative question might be the three magic words. How might we, ... So an example of an appreciative question that a group I was working with last week virtually came up with was this. Imagine if our community came together to create housing opportunities so young families could move back. What would that look like? That was their appreciative question. And we know that this big framing question needs kind of four components. It needs to be surprising, things people haven't thought about or discussed before. It needs to be personal. It needs to touch our hearts. If we're passionate about this big framing question, it's going to help keep us involved. It needs to be relational. It needs to prompt stories that build relationships and trust. And it needs to be real. It forces us to look at reality a little differently. So these succinct questions do not have an easy answer, and they could also have several solutions. That makes for a good appreciative question. Okay, so rule 3. The next step in what we do as a group together. So our groups are usually about 5 to 8 people, and we bring them together around this big framing question that we just talked about. And then we dive into kind of an asset mapping experience where we sort and bundle the assets of the people in the group. And we divide those assets into 4 categories: physical, social, skills, and capital assets. So each person writes a list of the assets that they are willing to give. For instance, one of my assets could be that I have an empty lot sitting next to my house that I own and have control over. I'm willing to put that asset up. Somebody else might have some relationships with city council people, and that's a social asset. Somebody else might have a skill like a real estate license, right? Or practice in that. As we build around that big framing question and the skills that we can bring, we create this giant list of skills that this team has. And then we jump to rule 4. Rule 4 is fun because we take all those assets and we've written them out on cards. And sometimes I'll put them up on a sticky wall, or sometimes I'll just throw them in the middle of a table, whatever works. And if we're doing it virtually, we do it on a virtual sticky wall. But we just start linking and leveraging those assets. So my property, right, that I have available and I'm willing to give up might connect with someone else's asset, like I have some funding, somebody else has some funding, right? So they come together and say, hey, what could we do with the funding and an empty lot? And the real estate agent says, I have some skill to add to that. What opportunity could we create with those 3 assets? So what we do is we start to get really innovative and we link and leverage those assets to come up with new opportunities. Rule 5 is where we decide on on those opportunities. Okay. So the group I worked with about a week ago, their big easy, as we call it, was to convert old property and advertise available lots for sale. And the way they came up with this is they had about 5 or 6 different opportunities that they had created from linking and leveraging their assets within the group. And then they narrowed it down to 3, and they used this big, easy decision-making process to land on one. Just one of those opportunities to help them move forward. So the big easy is an opportunity that combines ease with impact. So you see the little chart down there below? We use something just like that, and we ask everyone to rank the ease and the impact of those opportunities. Each person in the group evaluates those things. They write down the numbers that they want. We use sticky dots and we put them up on that chart like that. And where we want them to land is kind of in that high impact, high ease area. Okay. So if opportunity number 3 shows up in that high impact, high ease area by everyone's dot voting, we know that that's the place for us to start, because the reason we choose a big easy is not because it's the right decision to make. It's because it's the one that's going to help us get a little win quicker. It helps us work together to accomplish something in a quick fashion, maybe like 90 days, and to move forward and help the community also see some progress in the work that we're doing. So the Big Easy is a really great decision-making tool for a lot of reasons. And then we dive into Rule 6. In this section, we ask the group to imagine what success would look like. Okay, so now you've decided on what your Big Easy is. What's success going to look like? What are people going to see when you've accomplished this Big Easy? How would people feel? How would their lives be different if this group is completely successful in accomplishing that Big Easy? From there, we take it to Rule 7. And Rule 7 is about breaking down that opportunity, that Big Easy, into one Pathfinder project. One project that we can accomplish in a really short amount of time. So a good Pathfinder project engages all the people around the table. You don't need permission to carry it out, which means we're not going to have to go to city council and get it approved, or the county commission, to get an easement or anything like that. It will be completed within approximately 3 to 6 months. It will serve as a vehicle to attract others to create buzz in the community. It will help participants test some key assumptions that they might have. And it will have a clear endpoint for a go, no-go decision. So the people within the group, once it's accomplished, the group can disband, or they can go back and look at their other opportunities that they came up with in step 4 and come up with another Pathfinder project and keep moving forward together. Rule 8 is where we draft out an action plan. And I love this part of it. Everyone loves action, right? But the piece about this is that everyone is asked to do something. You know how it is sometimes when you're in a group and like there's 2 or 3 people in the group that end up doing all of the work, and the other 5 people or so just are showing up. In this process, we like to say everyone needs to take one action item to move this forward. And we're going to meet again in 30 days. And if you can only contribute 15 minutes, that's okay. Maybe somebody else has 5 hours to commit to this project, but everybody needs to take an action item. So we plan those small steps. And then rule 9 is to set a 30-30 meeting. This is a cool piece of the process as well, because it creates a standard agenda for every meeting. So you're going to meet again in 30 days, and you're going to take maybe 30 minutes and accomplish that meeting. It's not going to be an hour and a half or 2-hour meeting. And you're going to ask the same things at every meeting. Because you created that action plan, people should have checked off what they did. And you show up and you say, okay, what have we learned? Not what did you do in the last 30 days, but what did we learn? Okay. And then we talk about, did anything not get done? There's no shame in this, because sometimes it didn't get done because it might have been the wrong thing. Gee, I found out that that's not going to work. I think I'm going to need to do this in order to move us forward instead. That was a win. You just learned that that's not going to work in this process, right? So move forward. And if it's something that didn't get done because I just forgot, it's okay. Put it back on the action plan for next month. And then you ask your group, does this proposed course still make sense? Are we going in the right direction? Or do we need to reset our course? And then lastly, you take 10 or 15 minutes and you create your action plan for the next 30 days. And you always set your next meeting so that your deadlines for those action items are done before the next meeting. You don't leave until you've set the next meeting. And then rule 10 is just about nudging. That's one of the roles in strategic doing, is that you appoint a nudger, which is a role that you're not necessarily a poker, but you're the person there to help support and to say, hey, I see that you didn't accomplish your action item by the due date. Is there something we can help you with? How can we move you forward? Are you stuck? Okay. So that nudger is kind of that person that keeps things moving forward between the times. And then another great tool, if you do need a strategic plan for a big project, you can lay this out in a one-pager, right? Like, what's the big easy? What's the thing we're trying to work towards? And then what are our success metrics? What is success going to look like? What's the project we're working on right now? What are some guideposts around that? What are we going to do in 30 days or 60 days or 90 days? So it's just a really great tool. And those last few 10 slides or so, you will get an action plan pack. It's called an action pack that can guide you through all of those 10 steps. So that was a fast and furious understanding of strategic doing. And I'm excited to talk about it with you a little bit too.
Thanks, Paula. I've been jotting down lots of notes, and yes, for those of you who have asked, we will be making available to all of you Paula's slides from today, as well as the resources that she's mentioned. There's a strategic doing overview, say that 3 times fast, one pager, as well as the strategic action pack that she has made available to us. That's about 11 pages in length, and it just steps you through rule by rule, and it's a great resource. And then she's also provided us a 1-page what's your 30-30 agenda resource as well. So we are going to be opening it up for questions and answers from Paula here shortly, but before she takes your questions, Sharon is going to step back in and give us just a little bit of information about a statewide broadband initiative that's taking place.
Hey, thanks. I have so many questions myself that I almost think maybe I shouldn't be doing this right this minute. But let me just tell you really quickly that in an effort to better understand the state's broadband capacity, the Nebraska Regional Officials Council, or NROC, as most of you know us by, it's an association of our 8 development districts across the state. But NROC has launched a statewide broadband mapping, speed mapping initiative made possible with EDA CARES Act recovery assistance funding. It's a crowdsourcing project that will gather the data needed to better understand Nebraska's internet capabilities, and it will guide decisions in the future for broadband infrastructure expansion and enhancement. So please go to one of these websites, test your devices, every device from home, from office, multiple times. It's going to be available for the next a good year and a half anyway, but test often. Like I said, every device from every location at various days and times of day. So it is available on our website. I think it's available probably at every development district site, but also at speedtestne.org and nebraskaspeedtest.org. So just wanted to get that out there. That's kind of an exciting project going on across the state. That's it. Back to Q&A. Glenn had a great question to kick it off there, Paula. He's going to really challenge you there about who forms or fills the leadership roles for the network system. How do you build trust when two members are in a dispute that is not related to the project?
Yeah, that's a great question from Glenn. So Paula, how do you address that?
Yeah, so a lot of times there will be a coordinator. Oftentimes, so I put in the chat some of the roles that we often use. A host or a coordinator who kind of manages those kinds of dynamics around the table. So if everyone has a role in the group, and the groups are about 5 to 8 people, it seems to really control some of that dissidence or dynamics that can often occur. So does that answer your question? Open your mics. I'd like to talk to you too.
Yeah, feel free to open your microphones. While we're doing that, Julia had a question. What is the largest you would say a successful group size is when discussing strategic doing and holding 30-30 meetings?
Right. So we say that an ideal group size is 5 to 8, but oftentimes you might start this from a community level effect, right? So maybe you bring everybody together around that big framing question, and everybody could be 100 or 150 people. But when you decide to break down into those individual teams, then 5 to 8 is nice.
Okay. I just had a question of clarification. You mentioned rule number 1 is the rule of civility. If those two members that Glenn mentioned are in dispute and they can't agree on the rule of civility, what then?
That's oftentimes when the table guide or the coordinator, just states, we're here under this one rule of civility, and we all need to be in agreement that we're going to respect each other and build trust. Sometimes you have to have that hard conversation, right? If you can't respect the others in the group, we're going to have to ask you to step aside. But if you can, then we'd love to have you, because maybe that person has some assets that you need in the group. That's the one thing that I love about strategic doing, is because these things are laid out right away, right? That rule of civility is put up there up front, and it's not just let's skim over it. It's like, if you can't live up to this, then maybe you're not right for this group.
Okay. I wonder how many meetings could have progressed much further had that been agreed upon at the very beginning. Sometimes we do gloss over those things. Sharon, you mentioned you had a few questions. Do you have something you wanted to ask Paula while others are thinking and answering their questions?
Well, my mind is about 40 steps ahead of that, which is just nothing but dangerous. But I'm thinking that several of us are embarking on things because it's a new year and we're just really sick of being shut down for stupid shutdown reasons and all of that. And I'm thinking, how many people on here have something that they say, I would like to roll this out, but would we be able to form a network outside of HomeNE or on the side of or whatever, and maybe could we have a I don't know, a Zoom or a Facebook chat to check in every few weeks. So I'm just thinking, like for me, man, this is great, but when I get out there by myself, I start to fizzle out. So I'm just curious if other people, if this has them buzzing and yet thinking, I don't want to die in 3 weeks and get started and then just sputter out.
Paula, any thoughts along those lines?
The cool thing about this too is that if someone does have to leave the group, I mean, someone else can step in, right? It's just then about, you always want to be inclusive, but this isn't a life sentence, right? So it's that boundary spanner idea, right? Where you can be a part of this group and then you can come over to this group. And if you have assets to add, you can do that. The other key thing I wanted to point out is that these 4 questions and the 10 rules of strategic doing. So they don't have to be done in order. Like this isn't a linear type fashion. We've actually taken some of those rules out and turned them into just individual experiences for like our economic development boards. Hey, let's just do the asset mapping piece for our economic development board. And how is that going to help us do some of the projects that we do? Because sometimes we don't know all those assets that people are holding, right? The other piece is the big easy. We pull that out a lot of times, even in our own work internally at Dakota Resources, and say, okay, we've got like 5 choices here and we got to move forward. Let's just do the big easy process and pick one. It doesn't mean the rest of them go away. It just means we're going to move forward with this one because it's got the highest impact and will be the easiest for us to implement. So it's a great decision-making tool.
Perfect. Julia mentions that she's feeling excited about all this, but feels the same way probably as Sharon mentioned. So good. So what, as we're starting to think about how we could implement this in our communities, what's an action item that maybe some of you have gleaned from Paula's presentation today? They say a journey begins with one step. What's one step you might consider taking today in light of what you've heard from Paula? Megan mentions that she likes that you point out that organizations and systems have a lifespan. Sometimes a lot of my energy is trying to revive a declining system, and understanding that we can jump to a new system is a new thought. And I would agree with what Megan said. I think I've belonged for far too long to some organizations and committees and just can't do anything about it. So Mary's going to order the book and Amanda is purchasing the book. So Sharon says, when your horse is dead, get off. And so maybe we can make that a title of a future HomeNE webinar sometime. So good.
Yeah, that's awesome. And some of those realizations that come help us move forward better, right? When we can realize that we don't have to hang on to that old way of doing things just because it's the way we've always done it before, that there might be a new way and be open to that. So,
yeah, I coined a new phrase the other day in a conversation, entrenched in tradition. And sometimes that's the greatest killer of joy when we just stick it out for tradition's sake. And so hopefully we can take what you've shared with us today and turn some of that around and get, as you say, some of those big easies under our belt. So good.
Yep. So, you know, take some of those things and put them into action in small parts of your life, and even at home sometimes, right? Coming up with that big framing question for your family might lead you towards some new discoveries.
New adventures, new discoveries. So, yeah, so perfect. So, well, Paula, we've appreciated your participation today. And if somebody wants to contact you for follow-up or additional information, how can they get in contact with you?
Yep. So I will put my email in the chat there, and they can sure send me an email or a text.
Perfect.
There you go.
Okay, Paula at dakotaresources.org. So wonderful. So I know I don't have a visual on everybody, but I'm sure there's some thoughts spinning in some people's minds. So so thank you once again, Paula, for joining us. It's greatly appreciated. So
You're welcome. It's a treat to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So as we begin to wrap up today, I just want to draw you to our website, sked.us/HomeNE. This is where you can find great webinars such as today's webinar, as well as past webinars. We do see that people are going back and checking out those webinars from the past through the view reports that we receive. And so I'm sure people will be revisiting our webinar with Paula today as well. So check those out anytime you want to check in on something that we've done in the past. And so before I share what's happening next month in our webinar series, I just wanted to make a big announcement to all of you who've joined that our 2021 spring gathering is being planned. It's going to be a one-day event in Hastings. This is the topic that we intended to have in 2020, both in June and November, and we had to postpone due to COVID, but we are planning it for the month of June, and we are working to finalize an exact day. Dave Rippey of Queen City Development is going to be our featured speaker, talking about all the things that he's been doing and how a holistic approach to the downtown development of Hastings has brought life and living to their commercial area. So also just want to mention to you that the Nebraska Development Network Central Region is offering up to 5 $100 scholarships for housing and economic development opportunities to individuals who live in the central region. So feel free to reach out to me or Kelly Jawicki. She is the DED Central Region Business Representative if you are interested in knowing more about those scholarship opportunities, which can be used for a HomeNE event, such as the one coming in June in Hastings. So looking forward to that. So, and then next month's webinar I am sharing with you will be on March 18th at 2 o'clock as well. And we will be joined by Gary Brett Schneider of the City of Norfolk, as well as Tom Higginbotham with the Northeast Nebraska Economic Development District. They'll be sharing with us some of the housing successes that Norfolk has experienced over the past few years. So you won't want to miss that as well. So had a great conversation with both of those individuals this week, and looking forward to their presentations. So with that, are there any last comments or questions? Well, if not, thank you once again to all of you who have joined us today, and I look forward to seeing every one of you back here again in March. So thank you again, Paula. It's been a pleasure. So have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Lori, I see that Mary said in there that she just finished the course in strategic doing course.
She did mention something about that.
Strategic planning course.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and she had to log off a few moments ago. So,
Okay.
But she felt that what you presented today was much more clear to her. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. If anybody needs any additional understanding, and strategicdoing.net, they do have like online courses that they've shifted to.
Oh, okay.
And I know some of our staff is going to do the in-person training. I think it's in Alabama or something in the future. So
Yeah. Good. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much.
You, Paula. I think
Yeah,
it's,
sorry. I didn't realize that I was supposed to stay on that like tangled up slide for what felt like forever. I felt like I was like missing an advance here, and so I apologize. I really goofed up that component of it. I'm gonna pause the share. I don't think we need to do that anymore.
yeah, you can just connect from YouTube.